Yahoo! It's me! Awa! Oh, whoa! It's me! Wow! I'm real! Hello, everyone! Hi, hi! I'm a bit out of it. It's been a weird while. It's been a weird couple of days. I had, oops. So I puked over the weekend. 5 times. 5 or 6 times? I can't remember if it was 6 or 5. In like a row, like very close together. And then I was like, oh god, I'm sick. I'm not about to stream this week. And then I've like completely recovered. So I don't know if I just puked the illness out of me like I used to do. When I was a lot younger, I used to do that a lot. Or what? But it was weird. And like I also haven't been able to go to singing lessons for a good couple of weeks, which is really bugging me. It's really making me chomp at the bit, as it were. It's really metaphors, similes. It's really bugging me. You know, you get the vibe. Because I like singing and I've been enjoying my lessons, but I guess fuck me, right? He throws a couple of weeks of like bad body pain and fatigue, and then this week the pukey make my throat sore, so I can't sing safely. Oh, you know the vibe. You get it. You understand. Bullshit on bullshit. Sorry, a cat just screamed at me. Hang on, chat. The baby. The creature. She says things. But yes, our lovely protagonist Ethel is pregnant. Yay! Congrats, Ethel! You're pregnant. Not with humans, but that's fine. It's probably fine. I mean, the father will know what to do. The father, quote unquote. I'm sure it's fine. And like, the pregnancy hasn't been easy on you. You've definitely feeling the effects. But pregnancy drains everyone. It's like, there's a reason why the Alien movies have like pregnancy horror. It's because it drains you. It does alter your body forever. Like, it's normal. It's normal. I'm sure your partner will be there for you and care for you. She's been so kind and considerate through everything else. I know we'll be able to do this. Me and Chat have been theorizing about cute baby names for the baby. I think Patricia would be really cute. And Hydra agrees, which is really nice. I think it'll be really fun. I also brought up the point that a lot of diseases and poisons have would be really cute baby names if not for the connotations, and I think I'm right. Yeah, I think I'm right. Like they have a good flow to them. They sound good. Like Fluoride, amazing name for a boy. Medulla, incredible for a girl. It's one letter from a juicer. Like, it's perfect. What's not to love? But let's see how this pregnancy goes for her. I think we can do it. I think she'll be okay. I don't think we're having only one baby. I think it's going to be like a couple babies, but that's okay. We've got a supportive lady partner who's going to be there for us. It's going to be completely fine. We left off last time. Ethel was going for a walk back from... Was she going back to or from the corner shop? I think she made it to the corner shop and got stuff, and then on her way back she bumped into her old primary school teacher, and he noticed that she looked like absolute dog shit, like absolutely dead to the world and not in a great way. And was like, just, what if you came over to my place and had a cup of tea? And just had a rest for a bit. And And at the moment, a lot of us were like, oh, this feels really creepy. But now I don't know. I think he's genuinely trying to help. Like, he probably still sees her as the kid she was when he taught her. I think it's fine. Yeah. Nobody had ever picked Ethel first, not during PE, nor when boys had been carousing the school hallways looking for girls to invite to the prom. Why would Sparky be any different? Oh, that gives a flashback already, chat. I was the bitch, right? I was the bitch that people would run up to laughing and ask out as a joke. Yeah. Like, boys would run up to me in like, I don't know how your grades work. Like, as soon as we turned like 12, 13, the jokes quote unquote would start happening, where they would come up to me and they'll be like laughing already because it was so fucking funny. I still don't get the joke. I still don't get it. I didn't get it then, and I don't get it now. I understood that they were making fun of me though, but I still don't get why it was funny. And they would run up to me and they'd be like, hey, laughing the whole time. I'm not going to imitate their laughing. They don't deserve it. And they'd be like, in between snickers and snorts, they'd say things like, you're really cute. And some of them would never really like ask me out. They would run away laughing, like that was the big joke, calling me cute or pretty. And I was like, wow, guys suck. Oh, I hate teenagers. Some of you are okay. Some of you are like me, who was absolutely suffering. A lot of teenagers fucking suck. Yeah. Why would Sparky be any different? With the absence of both its owners, it was obvious based on the way Mr. Brown doted on him that Sparky had free reign of the house. The living room felt staid and sad, oddly inhospitable. Ethel hadn't had a chance to properly examine her new surroundings, but now she did. There was nothing else to distract her. She turned her head this way and that, her eyes wide. Unfortunately for Ethel, however, Mr. Brown's living room did little to alleviate her sunken spirits. It was hopelessly drab and depressing, the carpet and the curtains uniformly dull. The cabinets which lined the walls, meanwhile, were dark oak, all full of ceramic figures. There was something sad about Mr. Brown's home. The colour scheme matched his name so perfectly, it would have been funny were it not so sad. There was a strange smell, too, which lingered in the air, one of stagnation, that the air freshener plugged into the wall could not quite hide. His wife died recently, so I imagine he's still coping and learning how to live in a new normal. I say recently, it might have been within a couple of years, but that's recent. If you've been together with someone for decades on decades, that's recent death. It was a curious sort of a smell, actually. It made Ethel think of the forest, of the damp and the decay. It made Ethel think of mould. Maybe the wooden joints in the walls had begun to rot. It wouldn't be so very surprising, what with how rainy England was. Ethel's parents' house had mould problems too. It wasn't so very bad in the summer, but it always showed up patchy strains that spread by the windowsills and the radiators when the winter rolled along. Oh, that would scare me. That would scare me. Mold is really scary. You shouldn't take it, like, you shouldn't be, like, so casual about it. I know this is a game where we're literally, like, she's going to turn out to be, like, a fungi girl and all that, and mushrooms and whatever. But, like, for real? If you have mold in your house that regularly, that's scary. That's concerning. Wiping the walls clean of mold had become something of a tradition when the Christmas holidays rolled around. Mr. Brown's house must have been afflicted with the same curse, just like all of the other homes in Oxbury. Ethel doubted that the houses in Australia, with its golden beaches and its sapphire surf, would be plagued with similar problems. Depends on the region, I imagine. I know there are some regions that have although a lot of Australia is quite drought prone. So they don't usually get mold issues, but it really depends. I imagine maybe they get it in the city sometimes. Oh, apparently it is a significant problem in Australia. Whoops! Particularly in humid coastal regions like Cairns, Darwin, and the Gold Coast. Okay. So mold is a big issue in Australia, yeah. As well as in colder areas with damp winds like Canberra and Hobart. Yeah. Yeah, it's humidity that really can, like, even if you're in a climate that is technically hot, it is if it's humid, like I New Zealand can get quite humid. But we have AC now in our new house. Which is going to help, hopefully. But humidity, that's the real mold producer. If you see mold, guys, don't just wipe away what you can see. Like, if you can get like an investigation of your home done for the mold, that would be a good idea, because they can like reveal like mold that you can't see. Like, I'm always saying this to people I know, where I'm like, oh shit. Where I'm like, don't just chop off the mold that you see on the cheese or the bread or whatever that you and eat the stuff that's like not got mold, not got visible mold, because there's molds that you can't see always. If you see mold if it's mold you can see on something, there's going to be mold that you can't see. That's how it works. Australia was far too sunny, not at all like England. God, what a dreary country it was. And what a dreary house this was. I love saying that word, dreary. What a fun word to say. Mr. Brown wasn't so very old, but this home seemed to belong to a man at least 2 decades his senior. Ethel didn't like the interior decor. Try though she might, she couldn't get comfortable. Mr. Brown's home put her in mind rather too much of the old person's home in Marsden that her great-uncle had stayed in after he'd taken a tumble and broken his hip bone. Ethel hadn't liked to visit him there in that dun, brown communal home full of elderly men and women, but she hadn't had to pay him too many visits. He had died only a few months after being admitted. Apparently, he had succumbed to pneumonia. That was the official story, at least. Privately, however, Ethel did wonder whether being stuck in a home like that, with its gurgling radiators, brown curtains, and massy draught excluders, hadn't succeeded in carrying him off for good. There is something intrinsically important in making a home that is cozy. I find that when there's anything out of place with my room, like when I first moved into my new place, the first thing I did was make sure my room felt like me. Right? Because if I am sleeping in a room that doesn't feel like me, I feel like I'm not sleeping in my own room, and it feels weird. And I feel like I'm like a guest in my own house. Old people's homes were supposed to exist as places where the elderly went for succor. But Ethel couldn't imagine experiencing any modicum of comfort in such a place herself. It had been much too depressing. Ethel had been depressed simply visiting there, and she had only ever stayed for half an hour at a time. Mr. Brown's home reminded her of all her tragic visits to the old person's home 4 years prior. Oh, I just remembered something. I'll be right back. Oh. I returneth. I return. I remembered that we had dusted some of the mats outside for fleas. And that one had been left by the door, so if she stepped on it she'd wash her feet of the dust, and I was like, ooh. So I had to move that. Ugh. Mr. Brown's home reminded her of all her tragic visits to 4 years prior. The colour scheme of the living room was bad enough, but these Chinese figures locked away behind their display case really sold the impression home. They looked like the sort of figures only a woman well into her 80s would care for, even when viewed from a distance. Such figures might have been fashionable once, but they seemed woefully outdated now. Ethel had unearthed similar figures in her childhood during her weekends spent at car boot sales with her mother. These ornaments had always been grouped together in plastic boxes, all sold at a discount. £2.50 a pop, if that. Some of the more sorrowful ones with missing fingers and hairline cracks running down their faces had fetched for £1 or 50p, or they'd been bundled together in humiliating deals. Buy one, get one free. Ethel wondered how much the figures in Mr. Brown's cabinet would sell for at a market. She couldn't imagine many people wanting to part with their hard-earned cash for a retinue of sailor boys whose blonde hair and blue eyes had begun to fade. There was a girl, too, sitting beneath a ceramic tree with a book on her lap, and beside her, a shepherdess with curls who was holding a crook, a lamb nuzzling her thigh. There was a boy with a fishing rod and a girl holding a tray of what Ethel supposed were freshly baked cookies, and a clown who looked almost alarmingly realistic in his ceramic sorrow. Ethel busied herself trying to count the ornaments Mr. Brown had in that cabinet. Were there 20 of them? 30? When... Have Evie's little figures tickled your fancy, Oh! Ethel jumped as she looked over at the doorway, her head swiveling like a sunflower's. She had been so enraptured in the figures and in trying to count them she hadn't heard Mr. Brown's approaching footsteps. Or, oddly enough, Sparky's cheerful yips. Her ex-teacher had returned from the kitchen while she'd been examining his spoils, however, and now he was approaching her, a tray clutched between his hands. Those ornaments aren't really to my taste, if you're wondering. I'm not the one who brought them. They're Evie's, though they belonged to her aunt first. She left them to us in her will after she died, and Evie was adamant that we take all the blasted things in. They were very important to her aunt, apparently, so important we simply couldn't leave them. I was less enthusiastic. I said there'd just be more things to dust, and who really needs so many knickknacks? But Evie talked me round. She was very good at doing that with my Evie. I could never say no to her, not when she really wanted something. Mr. Brown shook his head at this, a touch bemusedly, or so Ethel thought. Was he self-conscious, perhaps, that he had let so much slip about his wife? Maybe he didn't think it was appropriate to talk at such a great length to a girl 30 years his junior. A girl who had once, more than a decade prior, been one of his students. Mr. Brown cleared his throat self-consciously and approached Ethel, the tray held steady in his hands. Here you are. I've got you some tea. I hope it's to your tastes. Or at the very least, I hope it warms you up. I do worry that you might have made yourself sick going outside in the cold like that. Especially when it's been raining so much lately. Ah, thank you for the head pat, Sophie. Hello, hello. I hope you're well. It can't be good for you. But if my mom's to be believed, there's nothing a good strong cup of tea can't fix. She was an awfully optimistic woman, my mother. Oh, thank you. Ethel accepted the cup of tea from Mr. Brown, then nursed it in her hands. Big loves you'll be looking. That's all good. Happy looking to you. Holding it to her chest like some sort of a talisman. The mug was hot to the touch, and Ethel's fingertips tingled as she nested them against the curved, smooth ceramic. Steam rose from the meniscus of the tea. I'm looking that up. Hang on. How to pronounce meniscus? Pronounce meniscus. Okay, I got there eventually. A fine gauzy steam which smelt faintly fruity. As for the tea itself, it was a startlingly red colour which put Ethel in mind of poisonous berries, the small round sort you found nestled among trees during the summer. It had been kind of Mr. Brown to brew her a cup of tea, but Ethel didn't trust the liquid inside that mug. It was far too vivid, almost garishly so. It was red enough to be visceral, gore splashed on ceramic. Ethel wasn't sure all of a sudden if she could drink it. She felt nauseous. Fortunately, Mr. Brown wasn't the sort of over-attentive host who insisted that his guests drink all their tea, every last drop. Maybe he did not want to be overbearing. He might have been Ethel's teacher once, but he wasn't her teacher anymore. They had both grown older since Ethel's primary school days, and there was very little to link them together. They weren't friends. They were hardly family friends. Mr. Brown himself might have felt awkward about inviting Ethel into his home. He must have been worrying that he'd overstepped some sort of boundary, because he didn't speak to Ethel, not for a few moments at least. Instead, he busied himself with sipping at his own tea which must have been too hot to drink comfortably. Ethel was certain his tea was too hot, in fact, because she saw Mr. Brown wince as he set his cup aside. Had he scalded his tongue? A deep-rooted silence stretched between the pair as the seconds passed, a silence almost as intense as that which could be found in the depths of Oxbury's forest. Mr. Brown bent. He patted the top of Sparky's head for a few moments. His beloved dog had begun to nose about his foot, as the carriage clock on the mantelpiece ticked. That clock ticked and ticked and ticked, denoting every single second that passed until Mr. Brown coughed. He cleared his throat. Then, looking up at Ethel, he said, "And how is the tea? Is it to your taste?" Ethel had yet to take a sip of her tea. It was still too hot, and anyway, she wasn't thirsty. But she nodded regardless. She didn't want to seem ungrateful. "Good, that's good. I'm glad. I think it's a bit too strong myself, but Evie liked it. So I suppose I've gotten into the habit of buying it. It isn't really to my taste, but I've got 2 boxes of the bloody stuff. I need to get through it somehow. Which is why I palmed it off on you. I hope you don't mind too much." Ethel shook her head mutely. She didn't mind really, though she did think it sad in a way that this tea was yet another memento of Mr. Brown's recently deceased wife. A good portion of the house, in fact, seemed dedicated to the dearly departed Evie. The china ornaments on the shelves had all been hers, too. That and the floral curtains and the overstuffed cushions with the cross-stitch patterns. The dead woman's influence had seeped into every nook and cranny of the house, from the tea bags which proliferated in the kitchen cupboards, to Sparky's mere presence. It was enough to make Ethel feel rather sombre. "Don't feel obliged, though, to drink it. Not if you're not thirsty. I won't be put out. I rather think I forced it on you. Just like I forced you to come here. I'm not sure if I gave you much of a say in the matter, but you did look rather unwell when I saw you outside the corner shop. I was worried about you. Do you feel better now, at least?" After sitting down for a while, Ethel frowned, still clutching the mug of unsipped tea between her hands. The tea had cooled down a little by now, but she made no attempt to drink it. She hadn't felt particularly thirsty before, but now she knew the tea was a relic from the Mrs. Brown days. Consuming it would have felt akin to sacrilege. Why, it would not have been too many steps removed from consuming the dead woman's ashes. "I do feel a bit better, yes. Thank you. You were very helpful." "I don't know if I'm very helpful, really, but I do my best. I can't leave people when they're in a bad state, I suppose, even if it does make me a bit of a busybody. That'll be all my years as a teacher coming through. I've developed a bit of a bad habit. But I didn't bring you here to talk about me. How are you, Ethel?" Now that was the question. How was she, really? Ethel was unaccustomed to people asking how she felt, largely because nobody had ever seemed much to care, not even her parents. Maybe that was why Mr. Brown's instant query had left her so shaken. Parts of Ethel appreciated it, she supposed, but another part of her, a greater part maybe, felt uncomfortable about the attention. She wasn't accustomed to it. Ethel? Mr. Brown prompted, his voice gentle. If something's bothering you, you can tell me, you know. I don't bite. I might have been your teacher once, but that was a long time ago. I'm not going to start doling out detentions. Not that I ever gave detentions back at Oxbury Primary. I'm not a strong believer in their effectiveness. Just, you've not been looking at all well. Your face is so pale even now. You aren't feeling sick, are you? Ethel cast her mind back to the events earlier that day, recalling the coughing fit which had left her doubled over, out of breath. She remembered, too, the strange black fluid which had stained her fingers. What had that been? Even now, she didn't know. If she had been coughing up blood, though, surely she would have been suffering from other symptoms. Should she not be shivering? Shaking? Shouldn't she have a fever? Ethel didn't feel particularly flushed, though. If anything, she felt uncommonly cold. For all Ethel knew, that strange black tar which had stained her hand could have been an hallucination. She had been very tired lately. She'd been worrying too much about her thesis, and then there was the girl at the church. If nothing else, you look rather distracted. You might not be sick, but it's clear there's something on your mind. Would you care to share it with me? I don't wish to pry, but they do say that a trouble shared is a trouble halved. Ethel pondered Mr. Brown's words for a few moments, letting the syllables percolate in her head like brewing coffee. She knew there was a degree of truth in what Mr. Brown was saying. Sharing one's problems with another could, in many cases, help to lighten the burden of trying to endure said issues on one's own, particularly if the other party was sufficiently receptive. For most of her childhood and later in her teenage years, Ethel hadn't had anybody she could confide in. Her parents might have been supportive of her, but that was only in a nominal sense. Lauren and Jude had always been there for her, and they'd done their due diligence as parents, but they'd never really understood her. They simply hadn't had enough in common. Ethel had been incapable of turning to her family for advice, and neither had she possessed any friends whom she could confide in. She had never had any friends. This had changed after she had attended university and had met Clementine. But even their relationship had fallen apart. She didn't have anybody she could speak to. She was all alone. That had been the case, at least, and if it still held true, perhaps she would have felt enticed into divulging her problems with Mr. Brown. But it was not so now. Not after meeting the girl. The girl was everything Ethel had ever wanted in a confidant. She was patient, understanding, well-meaning, and, though Ethel felt a touch ashamed for considering this a worthwhile criteria, she was very pretty. She was close, too, to Ethel in age. Much closer than Mr. Brown. Ethel knew that Mr. Brown meant well in positing these questions to her. But how much could he help her, really? They inhabited different spheres of existence. He was much too old to relate to her. Why, he was even older than Ethel's parents. He was almost as old as Ethel's grandparents, those on her mother's side at least. Ethel doubted he would understand her. She doubted it to such an extent, in fact, she did not want to try. How could she tell her old primary school teacher about her struggles with her thesis, and her loss of interest in her area of academia? How could she tell him of her recent breakup with Clementine, and how much that had hurt her? How could she tell him that she felt like an unwanted alien in her own family? That she felt like she had nowhere to belong, and above all else, she felt talentless and uninteresting and ugly alongside it. Oh, Ethel. I really want to just give her a big hug. She would be so uncomfortable if I hugged her, but I really want to give her a big bear hug, you know? And squeeze her tight. Poor girl. How could she tell him about the girl whom she had known for only a couple of days? And how could she tell him how much she wanted her? How could she tell him how much she would miss her? She couldn't. It was impossible. Ethel turned these worries over in her head like pebbles, her fingers curled tightly around the ceramic mug Mr. Brown had given her, the mug from which she had yet to take a single sip. It was nice that Mr. Brown cared so much. But he didn't care in the right way. He didn't care in the way that Ethel wanted him to care. Ethel had nothing to say to him. There was nothing he could do for her. She forced herself to smile, though. She knew it couldn't have looked very convincing. As she said, "Thank you for being so concerned, but I'm all right, really. There's nothing wrong with me." "Are you certain about that, Ethel? The way you collapsed in the shop looked rather serious, if nothing else." "Oh, that's nothing, really. I've just not been sleeping well lately, so I've been a bit tired. It's nothing serious, though. You really don't need to worry about me." "You've been tired?" "That's right. I'm used to my dormitory in Durham, so coming back to Oxbury feels a bit strange. I'm not used to it. It's hard to relax." "Ah, I see. Well, I can't imagine your fatigue is being helped by your sudden fondness for late-night walks. Perhaps you ought to try to have an early night. I know I've been getting into bad habits. I'll try to take better care of myself, though. Thank you for checking on me. And thank you, really, for the tea. It's delicious." Ethel hadn't taken a single sip of her tea. At this point, she was certain it must have been stone cold. Mr. Brown must have noticed this. He'd been looking at Ethel too intently not to call her bluff, but once again he didn't comment on it. Instead, he smiled, then said, "It's no trouble at all. You'd be doing me a favour, actually, if you drank that up, but you're quite welcome, of course." Ethel felt a twinge of guilt in the face of Mr. Brown's reply, which was so very good-natured. Her guilt was a brief, fleeting thing, however, which didn't last. Why should she worry about lying to Mr. Brown? It wasn't like she owed him anything. He'd been nice to her. "Ah, thank you for the resub, Ruby. Hi. 8 months, wow. That's crazy. Welcome in. He had been nice to her, but his niceness had come in the form of a cup of tea she couldn't drink and a conversation she hadn't wanted to engage in. Ethel couldn't relate to him, and neither did she want to. Sound kind of muffled in your mic? No? Now? Muffled? That's weird. I might sound a bit off because I've still got a sore throat. Toshi, thank you for the head pats. It's a bit better now. Oh, that's so weird. I love technology. I love how it always works. I love audio. It's so functional. Ethel had been 9 years old the last time they'd spent any real time with one another. She had worn chunky butterfly clips in her hair back then, and she had drawn butt horses in her copybooks. And she had collected scented pens and stickers. She wasn't the same girl she had once been. Mr. Brown didn't know a thing about her or what she wanted or how lonely she had been. And Ethel hoped it would stay that way. It took Ethel only a few minutes to return home, a fact for which she was grateful. While growing up, she had found Oxbury's diminutive size to be a negative. The village was so small it had been stifling. Now, however, Ethel was glad for it. It made it easier for her to retreat from Mr. Brown's depressing living room and his equally depressing home, and return to her own, Ethel's home wasn't much better than Mr. Brown's. Ethel found it only marginally less miserable. But at least it wasn't so aggressively brown. Ethel had clutched her carrier bag with the frozen pizza and the Diet Pepsi in her right hand during her walk back, so tightly it left a red groove in her palms. Her palms ached, and pushing her food away in the freezer made her arms ache too. It wasn't until half an hour later that she set about making food, and once she had, she found she didn't much want it. The tomato base of the pizza was almost luridly red, and the cheese on top of it looked like pus. Ethel hadn't been very hungry before she'd set out, and what little appetite she might have possessed had disappeared altogether. How could she think of food at a time like this, when she'd soon be seeing the girl? She was much, much more important than trivial earthly affairs like eating. Ethel ate as much of the pizza as she could, which wasn't very much, and tipped the leftovers in the bin. If Lauren had been there, she would have tutted about the waste. But she wasn't there. She was in Australia with her father and her 2 brothers. Ethel was on her own. Ethel whiled away the rest of the evening and much of the night as best she could. She watched more Supernatural in the living room, but she wasn't paying attention to the exploits of the Winchester brothers. They couldn't hold her attention. Like Kai in The Ice Queen, Ethel felt as though her heart had been embedded with a shard of cold, eternally unmelting ice. The shard of ice was Ethel's link to the girl. So long as it remained true, Ethel would never forget her. She didn't want to. When Ethel fancied enough time had passed, she finally stood. She stretched. Then, her heart all aflutter with trepidation, she set off. She thought about retrieving her anorak as she stood by the front door just in case it rained. The sky did look overcast, the moon obscured with clouds. Ethel didn't want to be caught up in yet another downpour. She dithered. But she eventually decided against wearing the anorak. It was a big bulky thing made of polyester, and it crackled when she walked, like some sort of giant sweet wrapper. It wasn't very fashionable either. It was so unflattering, almost militaristic khaki green. Ethel had never much cared about being fashionable before, but she cared now. She didn't want to look too foolish in front of the girl. If she laughed at her, part of her would have died. Anoraks didn't exactly scream romantic moonlight rendezvous in any event. It was better to go without, even if she did get wet. Ethel could endure a little rain. She left the house, locking it behind her, and headed off into the night. She soon left Oxbury's cosy cramped streets behind her, to the forest which fringed it. Ethel didn't hesitate before stepping foot amongst the trees. There was nothing to tie her to Oxbury, and nobody to tell her to stop. Nobody save herself. But why would she? She didn't want to stop. She wanted to see the girl again, which meant she had to press on. Ethel walked and walked and she walked. Walked and she walked and she walked, her path lit by the moon and by Jude's old torch. Carefully, she navigated the forest, dodging a root here, a gorse brush there. The ground was uneven and it was still muddy after the torrential rain from a few days prior. Once Ethel's foot twisted, but she was still able to regain her balance. She wasn't going to fall over face first before meeting the girl. She wouldn't let herself. She wanted to give the girl a better last impression of her than that. Eventually, Ethel escaped the tall trees which towered about her and stepped into the clearing. She could see St. Catherine's in front of her, solidly immovable as it had been during the previous 2 nights when she had come across the aged building. St. Catherine's looked as it always had, coated in the inky darkness of the night. But there was something different about the church that night, something which made Ethel pause. The light wasn't on in the window, and the door was tightly closed. Ethel couldn't see that hairline crack in the church's entrance which had become so very familiar to her, nor the candlelight which spilled out from it. Instead, the church was sealed shut. airtight, like an Egyptian sarcophagus of eras gone by. The church seemed hollowed out and empty, a dull, dismal shadow of its former self. Ethel approached the church hesitantly, her gait as slow and uncertain as a newborn deer's. Was the girl really there? Ethel wanted to believe so. The girl had said that she would be waiting for her, but she couldn't detect any traces of life about the old stone building. The nighttime air was cold, yes, but there was no breeze to it. It was as quiet as the grave. It seemed unlikely that the girl would be shut up inside the church, which now felt so very devoid of life, still singing her alluring siren song. Ethel couldn't imagine it. She was having a hard time picturing the girl at all, now that it had been almost a full 24 hours since last she had seen her. What did the girl look like? What did she sound like? Ethel was sure she had been beautiful, but she was sure of this in only a very vague, half-formed sense. Too vague and half-formed to be sure of it all. She had thought the girl perfect. But perfection didn't exist. Not even Shania, for all her pretensions to the contrary, had been perfect. How could the girl be otherwise? She was just, for all she had allured Ethel, an ordinary girl. Or was she? Ethel approached the church slowly, her soles crunching the tall, unkempt grass underfoot. St. Catherine's was a small, squat church, but its shadow soon swallowed her, drowning Ethel in a deep, inky darkness. Ethel reached out, her right arm trembling. She pressed her palm against the door, which seemed curiously impenetrable in the dark, the wood too firm and thick to give way beneath her fingers. Then she pushed. The church's wooden doors dwarfed Ethel to such a degree she was almost surprised when they gave way beneath her palms. The door opened with a low, guttural creaking, which swelled in the silence. It sounded oddly alive, like a groaning monster hauled from the bottom of some deep, dark abyss. Maybe it was some sort of an omen. Ethel couldn't help but recall Mr. Brown's warnings from a few days prior. His warnings about the mysterious missing girl. I wouldn't want you getting lost. And you do know what happened to the Delaney girl, don't you? Of course, Ethel remembered the Delaney girl. Her mother had talked about her incessantly after her disappearance. But nothing like that was going to happen to Ethel. She wasn't interesting enough to be abducted, and her life was much too mundane. Everything about her was almost painfully ordinary. Ethel had always thought she was ordinary, at least. But the girl didn't seem to think so. She had always been affectionate. But did she really mean it? Ethel frowned as she gave the doors to the church another push. Then she stepped inside. She was eager to see the girl again, to speak to her, to ask her whether she would text her when she left Oxbury and if she would still remember her. But the interior of St. Catherine's was pitch black. St. Catherine's, in the stillness of the night, was dark, the air cool. It felt a bit like stepping foot inside a vaulted, vast-ceilinged crypt, which Ethel supposed it was. That was one of the functions of a church, past being a place of worship. The flagstones which Ethel walked upon were built over a veritable mountain of corpses. This place was a living, breathing boneyard. People thought the famous Sedley ossuary was grim, decorated as it was in ghastly, grinning skulls. But at least it was honest about what it was. It had no pretenses. It was earnest. But this was something that people didn't always appreciate, particularly not when the topic of death was involved. Ethel inhaled. In the air she could smell several centuries' worth of death. Then she turned. It was obvious that the girl wasn't there. There was no point hanging around. Maybe all of this, their midnight meetings, had been some sort of cruel practical joke. Had that kiss too all been a piece of trickery? Perhaps the girl was there after all, hiding in the bushes, snickering as the door of the church slammed shut behind Ethel. Ethel was unsure whether this idea appealed more than the alternative, that the girl didn't care at all. "Hi, Joe! Thank you for the head pats. Hee hee. Hey. Being treated as an object of mockery wasn't nice, but it was better than being ignored. If the girl had set this up as a means of hurting Ethel's feelings, then she had succeeded, but that would at least mean that she cared about Ethel's feelings enough to want to hurt them. Good morning. Hi, Shale. Good morning. It was stone-cold apathy, in the end, which would have really undone Ethel. Ethel stood mutely beneath the moonlight for a few moments, nibbling on a hangnail. There was no point waiting around if the girl wasn't going to appear. It was cold and it was late, and the night sky overhead was overcast. Maybe it would rain again. Ethel didn't want to get caught up in a downpour. She should leave. There was nothing waiting for her here, not without the girl. But now Ethel was beginning to worry she might have arrived too late. Perhaps the girl had arrived after all and she had already departed. They had never agreed upon a fixed time for their meeting. The girl had been maddeningly vague about it, as she was about everything. Part of Ethel enjoyed this vagueness. It gave their meetings a greater aura of mystery, but it had made arranging things difficult. With no fixed time to work with, Ethel didn't know who to blame for what had occurred. Had she been too early? Had she been too late? Had the girl come and gone, or had she never come at all? Ethel continued to stand there, dithering, worrying at her hangnail. She bit it hard until the nail splintered beneath it between her teeth. She bit the nail too close to the quick, in fact, and her mouth soon filled with the tang of copper. Her tongue was tingling. Christ, Ethel sighed. Invoking the name of the Holy Sun, Ethel couldn't think of a more appropriate place to do so, as she did. What was she doing? Loitering around outside the church so late at night? 10 minutes must have passed, if not more so. She was being a fool. Why did she think the girl would appear? She should have learnt her lesson already with Clementine. Hope only ever seemed to give way to despair. Ethel squared her shoulders. Then she set off. She would put the girl behind her, pretend this had never happened. That would be for the best if it would spare her fragile ego. Ethel didn't want to be taken for a fool. Not when she felt foolish so frequently regardless. She stalked off, malforming and misshaping the grass beneath her soles, when... Why, hello there, stranger. Where do you think you're going? Oh? Ethel gasped in alarm as a sudden, unexpected darkness descended. One even deeper than the darkness which had previously shrouded her. At least that darkness had been alleviated, if only a little, by the moonlight. This darkness, however, was far more complete. She might very well have poured ink into her eyeballs. Ethel couldn't see. For a few moments she forgot how to think. Now, why have you gone all stiff? Don't tell me I've scared you. But a familiar voice, a scant few centimetres away from her ear, restored Ethel's senses. She recognized that voice. It belonged to somebody she knew. Not well, perhaps, but well enough. It was the girl. Who else would it have been? Ethel couldn't think of many other people in Oxbury mad enough to wander this far into the woods, all the way to St. Catherine's at this time of night, not without a prior appointment. Why had she been so anxious? The girl drew her hands away from Ethel's eyes and stepped back. She looked just like she always did, her dress simple, her hair short and dark. Ethel had thought the girl's hair, which was as dark as a raven's feathers, was pretty, when viewed in the flickering candlelight of the church. Outdoors, however, it seemed almost too dark, as though she and the shadows were one undulating amorphous blob. The girl's skin, meanwhile, seemed too pale, her dress oddly flimsy, given how late it was. Wasn't she cold? Ethel examined the girl questioningly. Though Ethel knew her, she suddenly seemed like a stranger. Maybe it's because she had never seen the girl outside the church before. Ethel must have begun to link the girl and St. Catherine's together, coupling them until they were one symbiotic organism. One could not function without the other. The girl without the backdrop of St. Catherine's nave might very well have been missing a limb or an eye or her mouth. The girl's lips, however, were very much present, and they were curved upwards into a familiar crescent moon smile. Were you looking for me? If so, that's very sweet. Oh, yes, I thought maybe I was too late, or too early, or... I don't know. I thought... that I wouldn't show up at all? Ethel fell silent. Anxiously, she gnawed the inside of her cheek. This wasn't necessarily something she wanted to admit to. It made her feel uncomfortably vulnerable. But she nodded all the same. She couldn't hide anything from the girl. The girl's voice might have been light, but her eyes were sharper than knives. Well, you don't need to worry about that. I'd never stand you up. Do you think I'd be so cruel? No, I don't. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant... You didn't think that you were worth waiting for? Well, maybe? Jeez. I thought that was probably the case. You silly thing. I wish you had more self-confidence. That might be quite the big wish. I did get that feeling, yes. You shouldn't be so down on yourself, though. You're a nice girl. No decent person would ever leave you in the lurch. Was that so? Ethel sighed. The girl ought to try telling that to Clementine. I would have come earlier, actually, but I got a little bit caught up. Caught up? I was doing things. What things? Just things. Doesn't matter now, though. I've got everything under control, which means we can spend a lot of time together. Provided you want to, of course. Well, of course I want to, Ethel replied quickly. Perhaps too quickly? Then she winced. Why did she have to sound so eager? That was so uncool. Not, Ethel supposed, that she had ever been cool. Did people even use the word cool anymore? Perhaps it was also dated, just like everything else about Ethel. Her taste in TV shows, her favourite music, and her fashion sense. What fashion sense? Ethel wondered if the girl would judge her for her blatant enthusiasm. Wasn't it a bit excessive? But... Good, I'm glad. I don't know about you, but I've been looking forward to this all day. You have? Yeah. You're the only person around here I can really talk to, or at least you're the only person I think is interesting enough to talk to. I don't want to waste my time with anybody else but you. You're special. Special? Yep, I said so it must be true. You can trust me. The girl giggled, and after a pause, Ethel found herself giggling too. There was something infectious about the girl's laughter. She really couldn't help herself. I'm looking forward to having a girly chat, just the two of us. But I don't think I want to stay in St. Catherine's tonight, not when it's my last day here. I think I'd rather go for a walk. That is, if you don't mind. Oh, Ethel blinked. She was surprised to find that for some inexplicable reason, that she did mind this. She minded quite a lot, actually. The word stranger danger flickered unbidden inside her head. Once more, she remembered the missing Delaney girl who had vanished into the woods without a trace. But surely she was being foolish. It seemed unlikely that the girl meant to lead Ethel into the woods to dismember her. She didn't look like a serial killer, and neither did she act like one. She did not seem to be in possession either of a saw or of any other potentially lethal instruments with sharp, serrated edges. Ethel was just being paranoid. Why was she such a coward? That's all right. I don't mind. You don't mind much, do you? The girl tittered, and Ethel got the feeling, though she tried to squash it, that the girl was making fun of her. I thought you'd say that, but it's good to get some clarification regardless. I wouldn't want to drag you into anything you didn't want. Now, shall we get going? The girl held out her hand, her stark white fingers extended in the dark for Ethel to take. I'd like to show you something. Oh, Ethel eyed the girl's hand uneasily. It hung in the air, suspended, much like the moon which hovered above their heads above the slate roof of St. Catherine's. All of a sudden, the girl's hand seemed so full of meaning. So much so Ethel shivered to behold it. A cool breeze blew about her, capturing the ends of her plaits so they shifted. The cold was twining up Ethel's ankles. It was brushing against her knees, the inside of her thighs. She couldn't stop shaking. The girl, however, was resolute. So immovable, she could have been carved out of stone, her eyes obsidian. Though the breeze stirred her hair, it didn't seem to disturb her. Her hand didn't waver. The expression in her eyes, which was very dark, was pointed, almost unassailable. Ethel stared into those irises, and she did. She felt herself trembling. When she swallowed, she could taste the cold, crisp air on her tongue. That, alongside the undercurrent of something unpleasantly fusty. What was it? Leaf mold, maybe? Moss? Ethel wasn't sure, but... hello? Didn't you hear me? I thought I was talking loudly enough, even if it is pretty windy. I said... The girl cleared her throat with an audible ahem, one which sounded staged, then said, her palms still suspended in the air. Won't you come with me? There's something I would like to show you, something that's very important to me. Unless you're afraid I might lead you astray. Oh, no, I'm not afraid. I'll come with you. Ethel crossed the churchyard, grass and stray wintry leaves crunching underfoot. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Then took the girl's hand. The girl's fingers enclosed about hers, and Ethel gasped. She was struck once again, as she had been in the church, by how very cold her palm was. There was something unnatural about it. Was that normal? Good. I knew I could count on you. You're such a good girl, Ethel. Now come on, let's go. I have a lot I'd like to show you. If you think you can keep up, that is. It was without any further preamble. The girl turned, her dark hair fluttering in her wake as she walked. The girl must have been slender, less like a flesh and blood ballerina and more like a fragile china figure of one. But her grip around Ethel's hand was surprisingly firm. Her fingers pressed against Ethel's skin, hard and uncompromising like steel, and Ethel gasped. She hadn't realized that the girl was so very strong. There was something a touch unnatural about the sheer force the girl was capable of exuding with that slight frame of hers. But a touch of surreality had tinged their initial encounter from the very beginning, when Ethel had found her singing in the church. Their meeting had felt like something from a dream. Maybe this was a fantasy after all. The way the girl moved, nimbly navigating the trees which surrounded them, certainly felt like something from a dream. She made no noise, like a minnow swimming through a stream. Ethel, meanwhile, was far less coordinated. She was clumsy, and her feet made no shortage of noise as they trampled the grass and the leaves in her wake. Once she almost stumbled, but the girl's grip on her hands didn't waver. The further into the forest they delved, the firmer her grip upon Ethel's hand seemed to become. The trepidation that Ethel had first felt when the girl had extended out her hands doubled, humming like a second heartbeat in the base of her throat. She could taste the earth when she swallowed. It was so potent she felt as though she was choking on it. Her mouth might as well have been steeped with stopped upward might as well have been stopped up with soil. They kept walking on and on and on, and as the minutes elapsed, or had it been hours, Ethel's feet began to sting. Her shoes were beginning to feel like a constricting prison, one which squeezed her without mercy. Her hand, meanwhile, was aching. Why was the girl gripping it so very tightly? Ethel had half a mind to ask the girl to relinquish her grasp, if only a little, to assuage her aches and pains. But though these queries danced upon her lips, she didn't express them. It seemed doubtful that the girl would reply to her. And Ethel was also beginning to doubt the girl's intentions. Her fingers curled around Ethel's tightly and possessively, and as they did, Ethel was struck with a discomforting sense of wrongness. There was something strange, she was only now beginning to realize, with the girl's hand. Her flesh was yielding, so much so, Ethel had to wonder whether there existed any bones at all within that hand of hers. If she didn't have bones, however, then how could she have gripped her, and so strongly, too? There was something strange about the girl's touch. There was something strange about the girl, full stop. This night had been nothing other than bizarre, but Ethel's surprises had yet to cease. There were more nightmares to uncover, nightmares which Ethel had never before considered. Her imagination simply wasn't good enough. It wasn't enough to preempt the sheer shock she received when the girl came to a halt, then glanced back at her. She observed Ethel, their hands still entwined like a couple of lovers out on a midnight stroll. Well now, isn't this relaxing? I find this part of the forest quite pretty, don't you agree? But there was nothing very lovely about Ethel's companion. Oh, she's so pretty! Guys, look at her wave! What a makeover. What a transformation. The girl's smooth skin, which Ethel had once envied, had altered dramatically during their walk through the woods. It was no longer as fair as it had once been, and neither was it so very clear. The girl's skin seemed to have tarnished, her flesh stripping away like wallpaper in an old house to reveal not bone, but a cluster of white growths which protruded from her skin. They were mushrooms. The girl's eyes, which had always been dark, now looked oddly bright. Halogen lamps which flickered in the gloom. The girl's stepper still possessed the features one needed to be recognised as a Homo sapien. 2 arms and 2 legs, a head, the suggestion of a nose, and a dark, pitted cavern of a mouth. But she looked like no person Ethel had ever seen before. She didn't even look like any monsters Ethel had seen on the television screen, crafted with stage makeup and cleverly concealed prosthetics. She looked like something from a nightmare, so removed from Ethel's comprehension that she didn't know how to define her. Ethel's thoughts seemed to have ground, and the moment the girl turned to glance at her to a halt, slowing, then stuttering. The girl must have noticed Ethel's disorientation and the distress which accompanied it. But it didn't seem to bother her. Maybe she'd been expecting it. The girl smiled, a dark, demonic silver smile which rivaled the blackness of the night which hung about them. The girl's dark hair had once been luxurious, but now looked strangely brittle, like straw. Her body seemed to be undulating ever so faintly, as if animated by some unholy energy. More mushrooms were sprouting from the side of her neck, her collarbone, her right cheek. There were mushrooms in her hair, garlands of them like a crown of flowers. There were mushrooms, some white and ghostly, others dun brown, sprouting in the crevices of her arms and beneath the tips of her fingers. The mushrooms were swallowing her, flourishing as they always did on the carcasses of old, dry, dead things. The girl herself, with her straw-like hair and her patchy, discoloured skin, might very well have been a dead thing herself. The way she spoke was certainly dry and rasping, as though she were enunciating through a mouthful of gravel. You... Ethel stared at the girl, at the creature in front of her, which had once been a girl, with wide, frantic eyes. What are you? Do you really have to ask? I'm not so very different, you know, from the girl you were talking to before. We're still the same person. Though maybe person is the wrong word to describe me. Lowly, the girl laughed. It was an awful sound, dry and scraping, like a tree branch drumming against the window pane. The sound sent shivers down Ethel's spine, shivers she couldn't control. It was cold outside, but the girl's voice was even icier. Don't look so frightened. You have nothing to worry about. I'm not going to hurt you. Have I ever done anything to upset you before? Mutely, Ethel shook her head. She wasn't sure what to say in the face of this nightmare. There were no words. There, you see? There's no need to fret. If anything, you should be flattered that you've been able to see us like this. We don't show ourselves in this form to many people. Only people we trust receive this privilege. That means you're special. I don't... Ethel swallowed. When she did, she could taste the cool air in the back of her throat. As frightening as the girl looked now, with her aqueous eyes. But were they eyes? And the mushrooms like barnacles, sprouting from her greenish-bluish skin. The compliment still made Ethel's heart flutter. The pathetic, pitiful part of her that always yearned for acceptance still appreciated the girl's kind words. But another part of her shrunk away from them, shaking. I don't understand. You said that you're the same as always. That's correct. But you're not human, are you? Ethel winced the moment this query left her lips. It sounded so stupid, hackneyed beyond belief. It was the sort of thing she'd heard her in Supernatural. Never had she imagined that she might end up saying such a corny line. How in the world had this happened? Ethel's face began to flush, despite the cold, from embarrassment. It seemed like she would never be cool. She simply didn't have it in her. She was too large, too unwieldy, too awkward. How very astute. But the girl didn't seem to mind that. She giggled, the sound oddly mulchy, muffled by the mushrooms which were now beginning to push their way out of her mouth. You're right. We're not a human, or at least not as you understand it. We are much, much more than one individual conscience. We are much more than a single individual, and we have been allowed to spread for too long. Our host was human once, but we have long since consumed her body. There are pieces of her consciousness left, of course, but she's become so deeply entwined within us that it's hard to differentiate her from the rest of us. We're all one and the same. Your host? That's right. She was a girl, an ordinary girl just like you. We met her in the woods a few years ago and she took to us at once. She opened up to us and told us all of her secrets. She gave us every last little bit of herself and her soul, and then we devoured her. A girl? Ethel gasped. Are you talking about the Delaney girl? Delaney? The monster frowned. There was a pause, then, oh yes, that was her last name. Delaney. We knew her as Isolde, though. She really was a sweet thing. So kind and trusting. She used to attend a choir and she loved singing. She had the loveliest voice, as you should know full well. We did try to make the most of it, before her vocal cords began to deteriorate. Ah! Hey, Potato! Thank you for the raid. Hello, everyone. You drove just in time. The monster has revealed itself. Welcome in, everyone. The monster has finally shed its disguise. Well, I don't think she was really disguising herself. Oh! Thank you for the follow, Dejan XP. Thank you. My name is Priscilla. I'm a doll. Obviously. I'm currently a cat girl as well, but that's just a cute one. We're just having fun with it. I play a lot of visual novels, a lot of horror visual novels, and I usually go for queer ones as well. Ah! Thank you for the follow, Anamika Kodatai. Oh, Anamika Kodatai. That's a fun name. But hi everyone. Thank you for trusting me with your viewers, Potato. I hope you had a good time. What were you guys playing? Oh, also, do feel free to join the Discord. It is 18 plus, but all my streams are 18 plus, so that should be like expected. For notifications and to just chat. I post my schedule on there as well. Ah, thank you for the hit pets, Wicked. Hi. And the hydrate, thank you. I have been needing that. But hi everyone, you walked in just in time for the beautiful girl who has been wooing us has revealed that she is actually a hyper-intelligent hive of mushrooms that is living in this girl's body, and she is just a host. It's really cool. I think that we are going to be taken over next because they said that their host is currently deteriorating, which could be really cool. So I don't think we have mushroom pregnant actually, unfortunately. That was my running theory. Well, I mean it wasn't, but like, it was a fun theory. And I was having fun with it, you know. We did try to make the most of it before her vocal cords began to deteriorate. We loved talking with her. All she ever wanted was a friend. She told us that nobody would remember her if she disappeared, that nobody would be at all upset if she disappeared. She said nobody would remember her name. And she was right, the poor thing. It looks like everybody's forgotten her now. But we haven't. She'll never be alone now. She'll always be a part of us, but as for her body... The monster took a step forth. It juddered as it did, and a few mushrooms which flecked its body peeled away, dropping to the ground like feathers. It can no longer deal with the strain. We've filled her lungs with too many spores, and her brain too. Her heart still beats, though barely. It's a pity. We know that Isolde was very attached to her body. Isolde. But we can't keep using it. There's only so much use we can get out of a host once its body finally begins to break down. Then, Ethel trembled. When she inhaled, all she could smell was decay. You're... some sort of fungus? That's right, we're a fungus. The only one as far as we know of our kind. This, at least, gave Ethel some sense of relief. She was glad to know there were not more fungal abominations such as this one, strange creatures more intelligent than a fungus ought to be, which lived on in the nervous system of other animals. She didn't like to think of small woodland creatures, squirrels, rabbits and moles, being possessed by a creature like this. Their own selfhoods assimilated into an awful abominable hive mind. It sounded a little like being eaten alive, but it was an act of cannibalism performed not with teeth on flesh, but spores inside the brain itself. It was a cannibalism that worked inside out, hollowing a person or an animal out entirely. Eventually the possessed lost sight of who they were. They became a shell of their former self if they retained a sense of self at all. We have lived in this forest for centuries, surviving from one host to another in an endless chain. But that's neither here nor there. We don't think that is very interesting. Our old host has already run her course. The monster took another step forth, then another. Mushrooms are sloughing off its body with every step. Ethel, meanwhile, took a step back. She could feel her heart beat in the base of her throat, a cold, hard thing like a marble. She would have turned to run if she could, but her body didn't want to listen to her. Her legs had locked up. Taking another step back was the only act of insubordination she felt capable in that moment of offering up. But it still wasn't enough. Ethel felt a resistance behind her, could feel something rough pressing against her spine through the fabric of her clothes. The monster had backed her into a tree. Now there really was nowhere she could run. The monster was upon her, one sinuous arm outstretched as it took Ethel's cheek, harming it, so Ethel gasped. Then, its voice low, it said, "But all is not lost. You are here and you care for us. You said so yourself. You wouldn't let us die, would you?" I don't... We know that you wouldn't. You're a good girl, Ethel, a kind girl. You're always putting others before yourself, even when they hurt you. We would say you ought to stand up for yourself more. Once again the monster chuckled, a warping of its host's vocal cords which sounded unnatural. But we think it best that you don't. We know you want to change, but we like you just the way you are. We like how soft you are, and how sweet. We like that you're so pliant. And we like that you want to be liked so much. It's very endearing. You're a silly thing, but we think you're very, very sweet. The monster leant in, the wind catching in its dry, dead hair. For a moment, Ethel could see the girl's face anew, could see her dark eyes boring into her, unencumbered by the parasitic fungus which had protruded from her sockets. But then the monster leant in. It parted its lips. As it pressed its mouth against Ethel's own, the monster's breath smelt of mildew. It tasted like a tomb. That was fitting, then, given Ethel's mounting confidence that this would be where she would die. The monster would consume her just like it had done to Isolde Delaney, to Chloe, who had gone missing all those years ago, to all the other girls Ethel knew had vanished deep in Oxbury's woods. Like a parasite, the monster meant to devour her from the inside out, and there was nothing Ethel could do. She was too weak to fight it off. Ethel had always been weak. Ethel had been desperate for any crumbs of affection she could scrounge ever since Clementine had left her. Her parents had tried, Ethel supposed, but her father had always been too busy, her mother too self-absorbed. Their love had never been enough to satisfy Ethel. She'd always wanted more. She had wanted... Had she really wanted this? There was no affection in the monster's kiss. It was instead an act of violence. The monster meant to impress itself upon Ethel to remake her to its own desires, and there was nothing she could do about it. The monster might not have had a nose, not a real one, but it did have a tongue. Ethel felt its tongue, a diseased lump of a thing, half rotted away. Nudge against her own, and she gagged. She felt like she was going to be sick. Would it repel the monster, she wondered wearily, if she vomited more black sludge inside its mouth? Would it be disgusted enough by her poor conduct to draw away? Or would it keep on kissing her? Ethel didn't know, and neither did she want to find out. Cheap viewers! Not here. My viewers are expensive, thank you. Expensive and exclusive, thank you very much. None of that cheap bitch stuff. No thank you. The kiss was unpleasant enough, rank and fetid, without adding the taste of vomit to the equation. Ethel remembered vaguely as the monster kissed her the slice of cherry pie she had eaten earlier. The pie had looked appealing enough, but that was only at a glance. Ethel had known something was wrong the moment she had put it in her mouth. It had been mouldy, flecks of bluish-green scattered across the underside of the once immaculate crust, like some sort of illness. The taste of mouldy cherry pie wasn't so dissimilar to the taste of the monster's tongue as it twined with Ethel's own. Ethel had been able to spit the ruined pie out of her mouth, but she couldn't do the same with the monster's tongue. She couldn't twist away from it. She didn't have enough strength. She felt with every kiss that the monster was draining her further, sapping her of strength bit by bit so her knees began to quake. The monster was kissing her more vigorously than anybody had before, almost as if to draw the breath clean out of her lungs. The monster was kissing her as though its very life depended on it. And perhaps it did. It was a fungus without its host. The monster needed Ethel to survive. That was why it was clinging to her. It needed her more than anybody else ever had. It needed her more than her parents, who had never bothered to understand her. More than her brothers, who had treated Ethel like a stranger. Much, much more than Clementine, who had finished with her. Although she had said that they would always stay together. Clementine had promised, and at the time Ethel had been naive enough to believe her. If only she hadn't cared so much. If only she hadn't wanted so badly to be wanted. But Ethel didn't have to worry about being wanted now. At least the monster wouldn't leave her. It wouldn't. The monster needed Ethel more than she needed it. And, nauseating though the monster's kisses were, there was something almost appealing about this idea. Being wanted was nice, even if it would result in her own destruction. Clementine had destroyed her once already, shattering what little self-worth Ethel had possessed. She had told Ethel they couldn't stay together, that Ethel had been too depressing to date, that she hadn't loved herself enough. Ah! Thank you for the hydro potato. How am I supposed to love you? Clementine had shouted. When you're always so negative. It's such a drag. I've been doing my best, but you're not putting in any effort at all. It's almost like you want to be miserable. No, Ethel had wanted to shout. That isn't true. I don't want to be miserable. I just want to know that you really love me. I don't want to feel like a burden. That had been Ethel's biggest worry in her relationship with the effortlessly cool, confident Clementine. She'd been afraid of dragging her girlfriend down. Ethel hadn't liked going to clubs, not like Clementine. She hadn't liked drinking, and she'd always stood in a corner awkwardly whenever Clementine had invited her to parties. They simply weren't her thing. Clementine had always pushed Ethel, trying to get her to join in. You're not going to have any fun if you don't make an effort, Ethel. But why had it always been on Ethel to make an effort? Why couldn't Clementine ever take her feelings into consideration? No, Ethel thought stubbornly, the ultimate end of the relationship hadn't been her fault, not wholly. Clementine had claimed to love her, but she had never really listened to her. She had never really cared. But the girl, the monster, was different. It had at least listened to her. It cared about her enough to try and console her, and even now it was trying to make Ethel's wishes come true. It was giving her a place to belong. But so what if the monster consumed her? Wasn't that what Ethel had always yearned for? Ethel would rather be subsumed by something that loved her than suffer the pain and the loneliness and the indignity of being abandoned. The monster wouldn't abandon her, though. It couldn't. And maybe that was why Ethel relaxed into the monster's hot, intense kiss. Her eyelids fell shut as though predestined, and as they did, her thoughts began to blend together. Her strength, if she had ever indeed possessed any of it, was beginning to fail her. Her knees felt weak, and her legs were beginning to tremble. If it hadn't been for the tree against which she was pushed, she might have tumbled to the forest floor. It felt as though the girl, the fungus, the creature as it kissed her, was draining her. Ethel's skin was beginning to feel uncomfortably cold, particularly the tips of her fingers, which were curled against the rough bark against which her body was pressed. The monster's mouth, meanwhile, was warm and hot and wet, its tongue rough against her own. The monster bit down upon Ethel's lower lip, and Ethel gasped. Her vision was beginning to skew. The taste of decay in her mouth was stronger than ever before. It felt like the monster was filling her mouth with dirt. Its kisses didn't feel particularly affectionate. They were far too animalistic. Yes, that's right. The monster spoke in a raspy voice, low and sinister as Ethel shuddered against it. Surrender yourself to us. You might as well. Who else will love you after all but us? We are all there is. We are all that's left. The monster leant in once more to press its mouth, which was more like a maw, against Ethel's neck. There the monster bit, and there it suckled, its teeth sharp as glass, scraping against Ethel's skin, so she squealed. Ethel felt the monster reaching for the hem of her skirt as it spoke. One hand, a dry, hard hand with sunken fingers skinny as sticks, racked up the long, dun brown fabric which obscured Ethel's pinkish thighs. Then that same hand was pressed between Ethel's legs. It was against her, stroking incessantly. Oh, we're getting horny again. Okay. Before, with a pained gasp, curses Ethel, one which the monster swallowed, with a demanding, destructive kiss. It was inside her. Hot, steamy sex on Twitch.com? Wow. Congratulations, chat. This seems moderate enough for me to get away with streaming. This wasn't the first time Ethel had done this or had this done to her. She and Clementine had experimented during the year they'd been together. It had been inevitable given the duration of their relationship and their mutual feelings for one another. Clementine had loved her and Ethel had loved her in return. They had kissed and they had cuddled and they had done more besides. Clementine had stroked Ethel to climax numerous times, Ethel shuddering all the while and sighing and wondering why Clementine bothered. Why did she like her so much? What did she even see in her? Ethel hadn't known, but she'd wanted to. In her earnest desire to understand and her ever-present insecurities, she had asked. She had worried initially that she had asked too much, but Clementine had assured her that this wasn't the case. She had told Ethel that she was not annoying. You can't annoy me, it's just not possible. I like you too much. I think you're too cute. That was what Clementine had said in the beginning. But the sentiment of hers hadn't lasted. Ethel sometimes wondered when her continued desire for reassurance had gone from an endearing trait to an infuriating one. What had made Clementine change her mind? Perhaps there hadn't been a clearly defined moment. There often wasn't, not in cases like this. Resentment tended to build up slowly in relationships bit by bit, like sediment on the ocean floor. It often wasn't possible to know in the midst of it just how bad things had become. Ethel hadn't wanted to annoy Clementine. Oh, a cat has re-entered the room. Hello, cat. How are you? Really? She's telling me. Is that right? Hello? Hey? Don't give me that look. Rude. She's mad I'm still streaming. But it was too late for that. What she wanted didn't matter. Clementine might have worried about Ethel's consent before they did anything approaching the erotic. But she'd not asked for Ethel's consent before they'd broken up. That wasn't a thing that people tended to do before they broke their partners' hearts. Ethel knew she was being unfair and irrational, but she could remember thinking Clementine wasn't all that considerate at the end of their relationship. Clementine liked to posture herself as a good person, but she hadn't realised just how much hurt she had caused Ethel. Or maybe she simply hadn't cared. Ethel wasn't sure, but... You don't have to worry about anything now. The monster intoned, its mouth against Ethel's ears. Its teeth inhumanely sharp, like shards of glass. You're with us, and we want us to stay together. We want to be with you for as long as your body can endure us. And unlike you humans with your empty promises, we really do mean it. That girl might have abandoned you, but we won't. We can't live without you. We need you, Ethel. So please, give yourself up to us. Ethel sighed as the monster pressed more kisses against her neck, her throat, her collarbone. The monster's fingers were still moving all the while inside her, stirring her. Ethel could hear the damp, slick sounds of her own sex, and she whimpered from it. This shouldn't have felt so good. There was something wrong about this, something raw and visceral. but it had been a long time since anybody had touched her like this, and her own clumsy, ineffectual pouring in the bathtub didn't count. This monster might have been made of fungi, but it was still better at sexual stimulation than Ethel ever had been. Ethel was unsure what that said about her technique. She didn't want to think about it. Could that have been another reason why Clementine had finished with her? Ethel had suspected that Clementine had pretended to orgasm when they were intimate together, to spare Ethel the humiliation of it not being able to satisfy her, but the monster, perhaps knowing what Ethel was thinking, leaned in and brushed the stump of its nigh-on non-existent nose against Ethel's. Don't say anything. But I wasn't? Not out loud, perhaps, but we can tell. You're still thinking about her. What? But how do you... We know a lot of things. The monster spoke with a smile. One which looked disarmingly girlish and sweet alongside it. We know that you've been let down a lot in life. That's why you don't trust us. You can't give yourself up to us. You won't let yourself relax. But it'll be all right. We promise. Do you really mean that? Naturally. We aren't lying. We need to take care of you. Unlike that awful girl who broke your heart. You're going to be our new host, so we need to take good care of you. We won't hurt you. That would be like hurting ourselves. We'll fill you up until there isn't any you left to speak of. We'll become part of you and you'll become part of us. And you'll never have to be lonely again. The monster continued to scatter kisses against Ethel's skin like raindrops. Wait, or was it round her? There was enough of a girl left in its face and its voice. Ethel wasn't sure. Kisses stung. They were like kisses. The kisses soothed. They were like blessings. Ethel's skin, which had always been as pinkish as opposed to being stereotypically prissly pale, began to bruise. Ethel's body was coming to life beneath the monster's muddied maw. Ripples of colour swirled around Ethel's throat and her neck, her clavicle and her collar. Her skin prickled. Her whole body shook. Then clusters of fine, white-capped mushrooms began to sprout from the wreckage of Ethel's withering, wasting flesh. Ethel opened her mouth. Did she mean to scream? But was soon silenced. The monster's lips were against her own, their tongues tangled. The monster's breath tasted of compost. It tasted of earth and of dirt and of the squirming, writhing insects which lived within it. The monster's kisses left Ethel light-headed. It felt as though she was being buried alive. Ethel was entombed in the darkness and trapped as the monster's kisses continued over and over. Ethel could no longer breathe, so she didn't bother. The girl monster had begun to worm its way inside her just as it had promised, their bodies becoming one. Ethel's thoughts blurred together. She didn't know what she was doing nor what was happening, which might have been why she cleaved before the monster's caresses. What was the point in trying to push the monster away? It would have its way with her regardless. It was a fungus. It fed on death and decay, things which humans tended to fear. How could Ethel ever hope to overwhelm a creature like that? She was too much for human. She was weak and fragile, too scared of death to fight against it. She couldn't avoid it. All she could do was accept it. Oh, Ethel. The monster drew back, then caressed Ethel's cheek with one hand, the hand which wasn't between Ethel's legs. We know you've been struggling for such a long time, but you don't need to struggle anymore. We're here for you. We'll take good care of you. So? The monster. No, the girl, dozens of girls, exhaled. Ethel felt their breath against her earlobe and she shuddered. All right, don't fret. I'll be with you and I'll never leave you. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Was that what Ethel had always wanted? Ethel didn't know. She didn't have the words to express her feelings, but even if she had possessed the words, she wouldn't have been able to speak them. She couldn't talk anymore. Her mouth felt dry as though it was stopped with cotton wool. She was choking on the air, on the atmosphere, on all of this raw, visceral affection, and she didn't care. If this was death was, then she would welcome it. It almost seemed silly now to succumb to all the kisses that she had ever been so afraid of this. Why had she worried about death when she had always been petrified of being alive? It was life which was difficult, the waking up, the getting dressed, the long grey days of nothingness, which stretched on for infinity. There was little she enjoyed in life, and the few things she loved had been bad for her. First it had been the violin, then it had been the escapism that came with her favourite fantasy novels. Then, it had been Clementine. But Clementine was gone now. With nobody to love her in her absence, Ethel had drifted. She hadn't known how to fill her dull grey days, and she had languished. Being abandoned by Clementine had hurt. It had hurt so much Ethel worried she would never be able to recover from it. It felt like her heart had been disassembled, as if it were nothing more than a piece of old IKEA furniture. She had fallen apart, but the girl, who was many girls in one, was pushing her back together. Those fierce kisses were painful, but that was only in the physical sense, and there was something oddly reassuring about them. It was nice to know that Ethel wasn't the architect of her own downfall. She was innocent and unsullied, a victim in the face of the girl's wicked misdeeds, and there was something soothing about being a victim. Ethel thought she could finally understand why the heroines in old romance novels from the 70s and 80s were such insipid creatures, so weak-willed and wimpy, who were so prone to swooning. Ethel had always looked down her nose at such stories. She thought them silly. But now she was beginning to reassess her opinion. She didn't want to be powerful, and neither did she want to be important. Most of the time, she didn't even want to be alive. She would far rather disappear. In that sense, there was something alluring about being a victim. Victims didn't do, they had things done to them. They didn't have to worry. So Ethel let go of her thoughts. They would only get in the way. She would surrender her mind up to these decaying girls, this immutable monster, just like she had always already surrendered her body. Slowly they were becoming one. Ethel was the girl and the girl was Ethel. Ethel no longer knew where she stopped and the girl began. She was being consumed bit by bit, and Ethel no longer cared to fight against her. Perhaps the monster had been right. Perhaps this was what she wanted. She didn't want to be loved after Clementine had left her, not necessarily. She didn't think she deserved it. She had never thought that she deserved it. Wasn't that why Clementine had left her to begin with? Instead, she wanted to be obliterated. She wanted to cease to be, and if this girl monster was willing to do that for her, wasn't it the same as loving her? That's right, you're doing so well. A litany of girls murmured, a symphony of overlapping voices, as their fingers rubbed against Ethel, rubbing inside her. Just a little more. Let's keep going. We'll make you feel so good you forget everything. When we're through with you, you won't remember all your regrets. You won't remember your mistakes. You won't need to. We'll do the remembering for you, which means we'll do all the hurting for you too. You'll never have to feel pain again. We'll take it all away. We'll become one, and then we'll always be together. Yes, Ethel thought with a breathy gasp. These girls would take everything away. They would take her history, assume her face. They would inhabit her body, spores filling her lungs, her head, and her heart. They would live Ethel's life for her, and Ethel would... She would disappear. She didn't want to live anymore. She hadn't wanted to live in a long while. Why not submit herself to these girls? A collective consciousness would probably do a better job of being Ethel than Ethel herself had ever had. Ethel's back arched. Her body seemed to fall apart, to bust, to bloom, to blossom anew. Her heart hammered. Then her mind contracted. It collapsed. And everything fell apart. Oh my god, that was so good. Oh my god. I love that. Obsessed. Obsessed. That's so cool. Oh my goodness. That was incredible. I loved that so much. I hope you guys enjoyed that too. Because that was incredible. I don't have words. That was just intense. That was so intense and amazing. Oh, right, that's right, the epilogue, Ethel Briggs was no longer Ethel Briggs. In the deep dark woods where Few and Oxbury dared to tread, a curious transformation had taken place. The girl who had really been a collection of girls, or perhaps they had been a monster, had taken Ethel inside of them. Or perhaps it was Ethel who had taken all of these girls inside her. It was impossible to tell. One thing was certain, however. Where there had once been two, there was now one. The discarded shell of the monster's former host, the dark-haired, dark-eyed Isolde Delaney, lay strewn upon the forest floor, like a pile of unwanted kindling. Isolde's body no longer looked like Isolde's body. It had undergone a curious sort of metamorphosis once it had been abandoned. Her discarded carcass lay curled up like a shed chrysalis, a cocoon. Mushrooms had begun to sprout from their remnants, pushing upwards like sunflowers, as if to greet the moon which hung above the treetops. As for Ethel, meanwhile, her body too was beginning to change. Her skin rippled as she took the monster and its many, many consciousnesses inside her. A flood of voices filled her head, a torrent of girls passed who had been similarly subsumed. Ethel thought perhaps that she could hear the dulcet tones of Isolde Delaney, who had been such a good singer. But surely that was impossible. Ethel had never heard Isolde speak, not the real Isolde at least. She had only heard a phantom of her, animated by the shared consciousness of the creature which now dwelt within her. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Psycho. Why do I keep finding pieces of hair on, like, all over? Everywhere. I'm being subsumed by pieces of my own hair, I think. Ethel had never known the real Isolde. Perhaps the real Isolde, whatever that entailed, existed still within the monster, the creature, the mess of girls and souls all tangled together. Was the monster really a girl? Ethel wasn't sure. Yet she felt she had shed her own girlhood somehow in allowing the monster to subsume her. It wasn't just the monster which Ethel had taken inside first. She had taken what remained of Isolde too, and Chloe and Lucy and Susan and all the other girls who had gone missing in Oxbury in the past. They were still alive, though their hearts no longer beat, their consciousnesses entwined with that of their hosts. They had become something more than themselves, and in shedding their own bodies they had been permitted to live on for perpetuity, just like a fungus. Ethel too had shed her sense of self, just as the monster had discarded the mushroom-riddled carcass of the dearly departed Isolde. Ethel's body was no longer her own, but by the same token it felt more like hers than it had ever done before. Perhaps there was no Ethel anymore. Her very being was being buffeted, her fragile sense of self tossed to and fro like a ship out at sea. But Ethel felt no particular loss at this. She felt no grief. She wasn't sad, why should she be? She had finally found somewhere she belonged. She was no longer a she in the singular, was no longer a sad, lonely individual. She was... no, they were legion. They would always be together. And as the body which had once been Ethel's rippled and distorted, as it took its more voices and existences and consciousnesses than it had ever before possessed, its lips curved into a smile. There, see? Isn't this what you wanted? The monster crooned to Ethel in her voice. Or perhaps Ethel was simply speaking to herself deep within the woods, where the fronds of the moon's light struggled to reach. I told you it wouldn't hurt. It isn't even like going to sleep. It's like being reborn. The art. Yes, I'm obsessed with the art. How they've depicted the creature is so interesting to me. Genuinely very cool. And now we gotta read the notes. We gotta. Hello everyone, and thank you for reading Her Love Like Poison. I hope that you enjoyed your time with it, or at the very least you found it interesting. Like always, I'll write a few notes explaining where I got the idea for this little story, and some tidbits about the development process. So I actually had the gem of this idea for the story a really long time ago. Like Cage of Roses, it's another vague idea I've had floating around in the back of my head for years, lol. My concept for the story, however, was pretty different from what I actually ended up writing. This is a bit convoluted, but I was inspired to write a story with a cute fungus girl after spending the night in a friend's dorm room back in university and seeing the absolutely rank state of their shower. The friend had, well, I guess they still have, OCD, and it led to them not cleaning their shower properly when the tiles started to get mouldy because they didn't want to risk touching the mould. I had a conversation with the friend to the extent of, why don't you clean your shower? I can't clean my shower, my OCD won't let me go near the mould. So you're just going to leave it like that? Yeah, I guess. And well, it got me thinking. I thought it might be fun to write a moje, aka a generic boy-girl/girl VN, where the MC has OCD which prevents him from cleaning his shower. He's staying at home in a small English countryside village while his parents are on holiday and he's meant to be working on this thesis. Alright, this is starting to sound a little more like Her Love Like Poison, so his parents aren't around to help him clean the shower. The MC keeps putting his problem off while the mold in the shower gets more and more out of hand. Until inevitably, well, this was going to be a cute boy/girl VN. The colony of mold gains a sentience, becomes a cute anime girl, and then the MC starts to fall for her. He really can't clean up his shower now, because if he does that, his mold waifu will die. Oh no! I also had a couple of other girls slated for this very serious story. There was going to be a mushroom girl dwelling deep in the forest called Elsif, and I was going to give the MC a childhood crush who lives in his village and who sings in a choir at the local church called Susie. And I was pretty hyped about it. I even wrote a little bit of it. But the story never progressed too far and I wound up scrapping it. While I was conceptualizing this boy/girl story, I got pretty into writing Yuri. So I wound up pivoting away from het romance to write things like strawberry vinegar and blackberry honey instead. I still liked the general idea, however, and I wanted to do something with it. I sat on the idea for a bit until I happened to read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I won't go into any detailed spoilers for the story, but it does have sentient fungus people in it, which reminded me of this old idea I'd once had. I started to think about reviving this story and giving it a slightly more horror-ish bent as opposed to the cutesy comedic romantic tone I'd originally been aiming for. What if I made my mushroom girl a mysterious, ominous sort of entity who dwells in the woods and, like a siren, tries to seduce young girls from the village so she can colonize their bodies with their fungal spores and assimilate their consciousnesses? This seemed like a fun idea, so I started to write Her Love Like Poison. I think I also happened to read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher around the time, which has a similar premise. So I probably took some inspiration from that too. I decided to lean more into the spooky atmosphere and I had a lot of fun describing the dry, dead woods and Ethel's general sense of mounting unease. Leaning into the horror aspect meant I could do some pretty descriptive writing a la It Gets So Lonely here. I wrote Her Love Like Poison about a month after writing Lonely, since I was in the mood to write more spooky stories set in the woods. And it meant I could make the story... more moody. Her Love Like Poison became pretty dour compared to its original incarnation, since poor Ethel has a lot of self-confidence issues. She's feeling particularly down on herself about how her girlfriend left her, and she's losing interest in the two things she used to take comfort in, the violin and classical literature. I gave her a pretty uneasy relationship with her family, too, to make her feel more isolated. Though, by the by, I don't want to paint neither of her parents as being abusive. I think Ethel's mother actually seems quite nice based on the snippets we get of her. She clearly loves her daughter a lot, they just don't have all that much in common. I had wanted to lead into the body horror aspect more initially and highlight how scary it must be to be consumed by a being other than yourself, to find your own selfhood being erased. But the more I developed Ethel's character, the more I started to think, would she really find that such a bad thing? Ethel's quite clearly depressed in the story, even though it never states as such, and she's simply drifting along. She doesn't like herself, she doesn't have any friends after her bad breakup, and she can't envision a future for herself. She really isn't doing well. And given these circumstances, perhaps she would find being mind-melded with a fungal colony quite an attractive option. Ethel does resist initially, of course. In the original draft of the story, this final scene was much more violent, and had heavy undertones of sexual assault. But she eventually warms to the idea of being one with a living fungus. As the girl, or monster, says, they'll never be alone if Ethel submits. Their consciousnesses will meld together and Ethel will never be lonely again. The heroine in It Gets So Lonely here could only be so lucky. In the end, I wound up rewriting the last scene to feel more reciprocal. Ethel ends up taking solace in the idea of this symbiotic relationship, and she likes the idea of being needed by somebody. You could argue that the ending is actually quite happy, which makes me wonder whether it's a horror story after all. Is cozy horror a genre? I suppose. If you aren't like Ethel, the idea of being brainjacked might be an unpleasant one. But if you no longer want to live, yet you have no real conviction to die, becoming one with your mushroom overlords might be an attractive proposition. I wanted the end of the story to feel reassuring in any case, but your mileage may vary on that one. And some extra information. Mr. Brown's dog Sparky takes its name from the Cardiac song Dog Like Sparky. The girl's initial appearance in the church was a carryover from my original version of the story. I planned for the MC to spend a lot of time in the church on Susie's route, listening to her rehearse for an upcoming Christmas concert. And I originally toyed with setting her Love Like Poison in the same universe as the fairy song. Oxbury was originally Fenchapel, and the boy at the corner shop who bags Ethel's pizza was a cameo of my goth boy Abel from In Fair Spirits. Oh, I spotted that! I spotted that! Very funny. I decided to do away with this idea and set her Love Like Poison in its own self-contained world. But I still imagine that spriteless shopkeeper looking like Abel. Me too, Ebby. Maybe he's an Abel from another universe. Yeah. In any case, I hope you found some enjoyment in this story. It's pretty short. So much so I did initially consider releasing it for free, but I hope the general atmosphere and the very pretty art made up for it. Also, as an aside, part of me still wants to write that mushroom moje. Maybe someday. I'd read that, Ebby. I want to read about moe mushroom girls. I'll ignore the guy, but you know. Unless the guy is actually interesting read. Because the thing about a lot of boy/girl visual novels is they can be really, the guys are usually written so blandly. But I think Ebby does heterosexual stuff quite well. That is all for today. We did it. That was a pretty short one. But that's okay. Let me tell you what we're doing for this week. Hang on. So, on Wednesday at 7 p.m. EST, we're starting The Boys' Love Story, Beneath the Bleeding Moon. It's about... Oh my god, you're late, heart. I'm sorry. I'm wrapping up. Hi. It's a forbidden love boy's love with a rich boy with a very unhappy family relationship and a thief, and it's set in like pseudo-Japanese sort of setting. It's another Ebihume, obviously. And then on Friday at 6 p.m. EST, I am playing Monster Prom Road Trip with Tushi Bean, Aki Hoshikawa, and Tempe Baby. So I look forward to all of those. And thank you for the raid again, Potato. That was really sweet. And thank you for the follows, guys. I hope you enjoy my future streams. Oh no, there's always next time. Yeah. Are you for those who want to get notifications for streams, I do recommend joining the Discord and getting the role for notifications, because it is the best way to find out when I'm to like make sure you get to streams. And I have my VODs channel where I put my past streams up, so you can watch all the other parts to visual novels that I've played in the past. It's very cool. I enjoy doing visual novels a lot. I hope to do other games in the future, but my PC is a bit of potato, so we have to wait. I may be getting my new PC in the next couple of months. I was kind of assuming it would be a December thing, but maybe not. Maybe a next year thing, maybe January or February. We'll see. And I also am kind of active on Blue Sky. I say all sorts of things. I grumble about all sorts of things. Recently I grumbled about the, I also post about things that are exciting for me. But yeah, let's see who we can raid into. Let's see. There's not a lot of people live right now. Blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Nothing seems to click for me right now. Nothing is making sense. Let's just go for this guy. He's he's a big dude, but I like him. I shove you in a big ocean of people. Congrats, chat. He's playing a PS2 game that I don't know at all. He plays random PS2 games. He is also a real person. He's not a VTuber, don't worry. I swear it's okay, you'll be safe. Oh, I can't read him. Well, that makes sense. Okay, let's play this. You know what? I don't feel like reading. We'll just end stream now. Okay, bye bye everybody. I see you on... What the fuck did I say again? I see you on Wednesday. Yes, I see you on Wednesday for boys kissing time. Bye bye!